3 years later, I'm still hoping that Sonic Mania 2 will come out. But for the time being, I thought we'd head back to Sonic Mania for another challenge. Can we beat the entire game without harming a single enemy? I think it's probably possible, but I have no idea how hard it's gonna be. The main rule is that we aren't allowed to harm an enemy. If we do, we have to restart the level over or take a stock at a checkpoint. Obviously, we'll still have to hit the bosses, but the main focus is on the levels themselves. If I get stuck, I am allowed to switch characters and see if I can complete the stage with them. So make sure to take a seat, grab yourselves a Sonic G Fuel that you can save 10% or more on with code Bandy, and let's try to beat Sonic Mania as a pacifist. To make this challenge a bit harder, I decided to play as Sonic and Tails, at least until things get too spicy. So for now, I'm gonna have to make sure that both of them don't hurt a single enemy. Act 1 was fairly easy though. There wasn't much that I needed to avoid and only had to reset once. Another thing to keep in mind is that the score is gonna be all over the place. Generally speaking, you get 100 points for taking out an enemy, but I cut out a lot of deaths or resets, and the score remains the same if you reset at a checkpoint. Act 2, in the meantime, was a bit tougher, and it wasn't even that I couldn't avoid the enemies, it was Tails that was causing all the trouble. This goddamn yellow fox becomes the bane of my existence the deeper we get into this challenge. It all comes down to learning how to control Tails. The best thing we can do is to keep him as close or far away as humanly possible. If he drifts away and starts jumping around, he's probably gonna hit an enemy, and I know what you're thinking, why not just have Tails lift us? Well, if I'm gonna do this the hard way, I'm gonna do this the hard way. I only intend on using Tails for flying if I get stuck at any point. You're also gonna notice me getting hit a lot, and obviously the main reason is to let enemies pass by for space, but also to make sure that Tails doesn't jump. If I jump near enemies, the likelihood of Tails hitting them increases dramatically, so it's best that I just take the hit and get rings afterwards. Despite Tails being uncooperative, I started to get a feel of controlling him and was able to complete Green Hill Zone. Once I plopped into Chemical Plant, I ran into my first grabber, and yep, that's actually their name. I knew if I was grabbed by the grabber, I would explode and I would have to reset, so I just spin dashed across and we both avoided him. In this section, I needed to be careful with Tails since there were two enemies on both sides, but we managed to sneak into the tube and blast our way through. And then out of nowhere, the grabber just pops up and just like that, I have to reset. Yay! But anyway, after completing Act 1, we of course move on to Act 2. I was a little worried about this act because of all the bouncing we were going to be doing, but for the most part, there weren't usually enemies nearby. Interestingly, Tails got caught by the grabber, and I decided to just run away as fast as possible to see what happened. And to my surprise, we never got the points for his death, and he never actually died. So I guess Tails just despawned? Well, regardless of what happened, the grabber survived, and we can move on. These worm things initially worried me due to how long they were, but you can just walk under them and you're totally fine. Who would have thought? I also discovered you can get points by just breaking things in levels, so that's another reason why we can't really rely on the score that much. After playing some Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, we wrapped up Chemical Plant like a warm towel out of the laundry and moved on to Studiopolis. Right away, I made the mistake of jumping while Tails was behind me, and unsurprisingly, he blew up those speaker thingies. You know, I'm not even playing a game at this point. It's literally just babysitting Tails. But moving on, this ball guy was right smack dab in the way, and thankfully he has a shield that doesn't kill him, so we can just bounce around him and we're fine. And I destroyed an enemy immediately following that. I've got to be more patient. Get it together, me! Getting past these two speakers was actually really tough, because when I let myself take damage at the top, I'd fall all the way to the bottom and have very little time to boost through them. Either that, or Tails would jump into the speakers. Lucky for me, this is a proper Sonic game, which means there's multiple routes that I can take to beat levels, so I just took another route to avoid these shenanigans. But then we got to these stupid flies that take pictures of you, and I did not approve of that. But what's worse is they stay close to you no matter where you go, and then frickin' Tails hits them, and oh my god, they're annoying. Once again, I found another route in this level and was able to bypass that section. After getting through that nonsense was the second act, and I quickly learned that if you don't get down this tube immediately, you'll get swarmed with enemies and you basically set yourself up to reset. And that's really all there is to say about Studiopolis. A lot of this zone just requires careful platforming and being wary of your surroundings. On to Flying Battery. This zone required tons of Tails control and really planning ahead. There were loads of enemies on the floor and ceiling that I needed to stay away from, and damage boosting properly was a must. I panicked for a second when I was forced onto this gold grabber, but these ones don't blow up when you're released. On to Act 2, these chickens were just miserable to put up with. They will constantly shoot their egg pellets at you, and there's nothing you can do besides avoid the bullets. The only reason I got past these chickens at this part is because Tails fell off the side and I was lucky enough to have him away from me for more than 5 seconds. This level took a lot of attempts. Thank God for the checkpoints, because it was increasingly frustrating to watch Tails take out enemies off screen. But the good news is we can get through this level and move on to Press Garden Zone. This is where the trouble really forebodes itself. Press Garden Zone is where levels start to get more compressed together. The overall designs become more narrow. And that's kind of a problem when I'm trying to avoid enemies. Like, this crab is obstructing the entire walkway, so I have no choice but to damage boost through and spin dash through the walls. And then there's this crap. How in the world am I gonna get through this with Sonic and Tails? Well, I'll tell you how. We don't. We're switching to solo Tails for this one. I'm able to barely fly myself in between the crabs with no harm done. Then we've got these bouncy, bumbling bunny boozies, and I had to be careful to not jump on their dumb heads. After that, though, the rest of the level wasn't too shabby. I imagine things aren't going to get any easier coming up. I decided that I might as well finish the rest of this zone with Tails since I was already here. I'll go back with Sonic and Tails afterwards. And besides these bird bombs getting in my way, this level was pretty simple to knock out. With Stardust Speedway, I did end up resetting a couple times because I let Tails get too far away from me, but there isn't much notable to report on. And the same goes for Act 2. In fact, this was probably the easiest zone we've gone through yet, with only 2 or 3 resets required. And next is Hydro City. Oh, Lord have mercy. You know, I actually really love this level, but avoiding enemies in the water is like trying to eat a hot dog with boxing gloves on. It's grueling and painful. The problem was either running out of air or these fish would snap on my stupid face and drain my rings. So of course, the only solution was to take a different route, and I had to stay out of the water as much as I possibly could. But believe me, there was still plenty of enemies on land that were hard to avoid, or I'm forced to damage boost through them, and often that would launch me back into the water. And these flies scared the crap out of me because their patterns were so erratic. I was just worried that jumping at any point would cause Tails to hit one of them. But alas, I was able to get to Act 2 and it was a lot easier. I just had to worry about these sharks because they kept spawning in and you never knew where they'd be or when it would be safe to jump. For fun, I wanted to squish Tails after all the pain he's put me through, but instead some weird glitch forced him to continue spinning in the air. Well, at least something cool came out of that. After some time though, I managed to clear Hydro City and carry on. But oh mama, was I in for a doozy with Mirage Saloon. The hard-boiled fella drops an enemy at the beginning and then turns into 2 birds. And that's where true hell begins, because these birds will follow you for the whole level. They swarm around you at the most awkward angles and are extremely easy to run into. And worse, another bird comes in and even more enemies spawn in. What makes this so hard is just how limited your movement is. You can't move forward and push down because you'll turn into a ball and probably hit something. You can't really jump unless you're specifically avoiding the birds, and even then it's still hard to do. I must have tried this level at least 100 times. I was legit raging by the end. I would hit the birds again and again and again and again and again and again. Oh, and guess what? Again! I imagine that this is possible if you're, I don't know, a Sonic god or something, but I could not pull this off no matter how hard I tried. I eventually gave up and decided to try out Tails. I figured that maybe I could fly high into the air and work with that, but no! Tails is stuck at the top of the screen and is just as hard as Sonic. So my only option is to attempt this level with Knuckles. And as I'm sure you know, Knuckles has a completely different level. At this point, the Pacifist challenge is all over the place with different levels coming into play, but I'll still only use him when I need to. This was a refreshing level because so many random stage elements would bounce me higher and also give me points. So even though the score is high, the level itself only required a few resets. After finally getting through Act 1, we made it to Act 2. Again, lots of random bouncy things were giving me points, but there were very few enemies to worry about. This level wasn't much of a problem as we cruised our way to Oil Ocean. And right away was this Octorok guy, and Tails would not stop hitting him no matter which angle I approached him at. I'm not gonna lie, my patience was running really thin at this point, so I switched to Tails to just finish this zone. And thank God I did that, because I finally had a little bit of relief since he can fly around. I still had to be careful, but I felt like I stood a chance for once. And then on to Act 2, the main worry was just keeping the smoke at bay and not so much the enemies, so I didn't have that many to avoid. That was until I got to the ship. There were several Octorok guys spitting their seeds, and I needed to plan out my moves very carefully to evade them all. And that's really about it for Oil Ocean. That went a lot better than the previous zone. I went back to Sonic and Tails for Lava Reef, and this is another one of those zones that was just annoying as hell. Right away, this dinosaur idiot stuck his head out of the lava only for me to run right into him. There is no way I'm avoiding that to any capacity without Tails bonking him, and not even damage boosting worked the one time I jumped over his body. I mean, seriously, that was the best luck I was gonna get. Thankfully with Knuckles, I was able to glide right over him. After that jump, the enemies weren't too hard to avoid. I just needed to do more damage boosting as you'd expect by now. Act 2 made me realize how much I hate this level. Nothing about it was particularly challenging, but it just felt like it never ended. And I kept hitting enemies in stupid ways, and like Mirage Saloon, I was really getting heated after a while. These fog pole things perfectly set the norm for this level, and that's the fact that there's narrow pathways all over the place with enemies smack dab in the middle. A grueling 30 minutes later, I finished this act and was just so done. You know, I usually really enjoy making these challenge videos, but at this point, I just wanted this to be over with. It's really rare that I feel like this with videos at all, but I only had 2 more zones to go and figured I might as well just wrap this up. For the rest of the video, I chose to play as Knuckles. Frankly, I was getting tired of getting gypped by Tails. That felt like a valid enough reason to just use him instead. And hey, I finally caught a lucky break as the enemies were, for the most part, easy to avoid. And the same goes for Act 2 of Metallic Madness. I just needed to play carefully and no enemies were harmed. But now we're at the final zone, Titanic Monarch. There was a lot of stuff to avoid and the level was pretty long, but it really wasn't that bad. And of course, the final level, Act 2, is extremely enduring with 4 different segments to play through. I needed to make a lot of careful jumps to avoid everyone, but again, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. I actually forgot how irritating and confusing parts of this level can be, but most of this challenge doesn't involve the enemies. So when I made it to the final boss, I just realized that I did it. I can confirm that it is possible to beat Sonic Mania without touching a single enemy. Oh my God. I never want to do anything like that ever again. Look, I'm very happy that the challenge was possible, but that was such a slog. But hey, it made for a pretty interesting way of completing a Sonic game, so with that said, I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks a bunch for watching, everyone, and I'll see you all in the next one. Have yourselves a great day, and I'll see you later. Don't forget, 10% off, code Bandy for Sonic G Fuel. Or any G Fuel.